So today we're speaking with Sapna Srivastava, who is a multiple-time board member on different innovative biotechnology companies. She's got a long-standing career of over 20 years in both Wall Street and biotechnology. Over to you, Sapna, if you want to give us a bit of an introduction of your background.
Thanks, Holly. Thanks for having me over and giving me this opportunity to participate. Just a quick snapshot of my career. I think I spent over 20 years in biotechnology in almost the three different facets, which, really enable it from my point of view. I started in academia. I have a PhD in neuroscience, after which, I decided to move to Wall Street in 1999 as a biotech stock analyst and spent roughly 15 years there, really working through companies in a very emerging field of biotech. At that time, there were 6 companies, and I think there are over a few hundred right now. And I worked mostly at Morgan Stanley, and then I worked at Goldman, post which I decided to go and do something on the corporate side and really go from the advisory side to somewhere, you can really get your hands dirty and really help build something. And I ended up being the CFO of Intellia Therapeutics, a leading gene editing company. And really, I think, got to see firsthand how these technologies enable, making medicines. And after that, in some ways, I wanted to also go and do the next sphere. And I ended up being on the boards of multiple companies and really advising them on how to really, think through strategy, think through financing, and, optimally position yourself for success, and which is where I'm right now.
Great. How did you get your first board role, and what would you say is important for those aspiring to move into their first board role? Because it can be a bit tricky, can't it, getting that first one?
Yeah, I think, it's really interesting. So when I go back and think about it as to what gets you the first role, regardless of whether it's the board role, whether it's, an executive role, really a leadership role for a woman. And I think one of the most important things is to really excel in what you do. I think that's really, really important, because when you really excel, people want you there. And I think that's the first factor. The second factor, which I think is more, and that factor is common for everybody, right? And I think this is a women symposium, but to bring it more, directly on women, I think the second factor is really to raise your hand. I think we often as women think that, you do really well and that will be recognized, and somebody will come and tell you, you're doing a great job and we want you to do this. What we forget is that there are other people doing a great job as well, but they're raising the hand 50 times over. And so what you see as being often just waiting for recognition, somebody else is forcing their own recognition. And I think one of my first roles came where, I was talking to somebody and I said, I would really love to be on the board of a company. And he said, have you ever told anybody that? And I was like, no, I just figured that, when I'm ready, somebody will reach out. And he's like, you're more ready than most people I know. And, it was just really interesting. And he connected me to a company, which was amazing, where the chair of the board was amazing and who I didn't know, but was really looking for caliber, really looking for, people who can bring long-term success to the company. And it was Velos Bio. And I spoke to, the chair of the board and all the different people on the board, and ended up being, that ended up being my first board role that I accepted. And from there, I think, clearly, as soon as you get into the networks, and that's what's so important about networks, is it really, opens up a wealth of opportunities. And how do you really pick up and think through that is, equally important.
Yeah, so I guess it's just maybe that fear of not wanting to overreach sometimes, isn't it, in your particular roles? But it's important to know when you're ready, I guess. But in terms of the actual responsibilities that you would take on in a company, though, what would you say in terms of experience adds value and makes it, possible to move into that first board position?
So I think typically most boards, have to have a diversity of experiences. And I think they range from financing, marketing, entrepreneurship, really mentoring, public company experience. I think it really, most of the companies, especially in biotech, you also require, area-specific expertise. You require, regulatory expertise. So I don't think there is one clear path for saying this is the expertise you need to have to get to a board role. I really think what you want to do is, fit your expertise with the right company for the right board role, because you want to be real value added. And so if you're on the regulatory side, then you probably want to go for a company which is not preclinical, but really looking at how to develop their product, from phase 1 onwards and how to position themselves. If you're in finance, obviously it starts very early in biotech. So I think it really depends on your particular expertise and the requirements of the company, and how do you really position that for that, how to add value to that company.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I guess the boardroom, that's where all the decisions are made, right? So that's why it's so important to have diversity in the boardroom. And as you said, when we've spoken before, you've said it's important to have the right split as well amongst senior leadership, but also a diversity of which senior leadership roles are taken on by women. You know, rather than it just being one type of role, it's important to have diversity across the team, really, and senior leadership.
Yeah, I think, diversity across senior leadership and in the boardroom is equally important. I mean, I often found myself on either in executive positions or in the boardrooms that you're really the only woman in that room, even today, right? And I think in terms of looking at that, I think it has to come from both sides. I think, and you're beginning to see really, cultural shift towards that. I think women asking more towards that and enabling that. But I think it really has to come from both sides. You have to have management teams which are equally, whether it's in finance, whether it's in strategy, whether it's in business development or the CEO, be women versus, I think, the more traditional leadership roles of women, which have been on, either human resources side, equally important roles. But I think you need to expand those roles to make it, where women are more well represented, both on the management side and the boardroom side.
Yeah, agreed. And what would you say in terms of advice then for those aspiring, just as a last point on the boardroom and senior leadership?
I mean, I think for people who are really aspiring to get into board positions, I think there are always two things to think about, right? What is your expertise? Where can you add value? And matching that up with where you should ask. And you should not hesitate to ask. Because I think I can't stress that enough. I mean, I think I found that true for my own career. And I find that true for so many people I speak to. I'm like, oh, you'll be a great fit for this company. And like, have you ever thought of that? And they're like, no, I really want to spend another 3 or 4 years really making sure I'm ready. And I always go back to that conversation where I felt like, I had to spend more time being ready. But once you get there, you realize you're far more ready. And, really, you have the expertise, the capabilities to deliver and really add value and not to underestimate yourself in any given way. I think really a recognition of that and reaching out and asking and ensuring people see that is almost an equally important component as building expertise.
And in terms of the bottlenecks that you've experienced then, I mean, I know that we've discussed before about, having children, for instance, can sometimes be a bit of a bottleneck. What would you say companies can do to overcome these sorts of situations and ensure that these don't cause these bottlenecks that they may perhaps have in the past?
Sure. So, I mean, I think bottlenecks both on, I mean, honestly, on the Wall Street side and on the corporate side, where, at least in my experience, I've seen is when you start out on an associate class or you start out in, early post-PhD, post-postdoc, it's almost 50-50. And as you still keep progressing towards the ladder, like traditionally, I think you see a lot more women drop off because inherently there is this sense that, the work-life balance, a term which you hear less and less or more, I don't know, but that, women always tend to feel like, okay, now I'm going to have, 1 child, 2 child, whatever it is. I don't want to be in a role which is 24/7. Yeah. And again, I think it's a limitation. And I was fortunate enough to be at Morgan Stanley and with a really great team. And I think the company wanted to implement that, the team wanted to implement that. And I actually ended up having 2 children at Morgan Stanley and continuing to have a really good career. And I think one of the things was that the corporate was willing, and 2, you were willing to ask for that flexibility. And I think with the change in how people work, that flexibility has become a lot more easier to have, right? I mean, before, it was location driven, you have to be at, this office on Wall Street. But now today you can be sitting in your room and for a couple hours do something which needed you to be there in person. And I think it's made both sides more amenable. And I think what we found most is that most women put up these boundaries in their own head that they can't do it, even if, there was a path to that, because they just thought they wouldn't be able to do it successfully. And I would really encourage people not to think that way, because, you will find you can do it successfully both ways. And not to hesitate to ask for what it needs to do it successfully. If you need to work from home, if you need to cut your hours, if you need to leave at 3 o'clock, you'll be amazed how many times people are receptive when you ask, and that it does not impact your career. Because ultimately, most people want to have the best person in the room. And if you can offer that and they can offer the flexibility for you to deliver, they will work with you. So it's really, I think, in a way, being able to ask for it and work and find a way to get around it. Yeah. And I think people should just ask for that.
Yeah, certainly. And I'd say historically, it seems like perhaps pre-existing networks has somewhat hindered the amount of diversity in the boardroom, just because people reach out to those they know, and it's just about that existing network. I think it's important to incorporate new people, right, in the running, and diversify and expand the network you have. So I guess, what methods have you used, or would you suggest others use? I mean, would you say that it's worthwhile, completing searches for it, or like, how would you say it works best?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I think working with people, is always a comfort zone, right? I mean, I find myself doing the same thing. I think a lot of people find themselves doing the same thing, because you know what you know, and you know that you can get a good work product, you can get a good work environment if you go with people you know. And so I think expanding networks becomes a really important thing. And I think, again, a lot of it comes from the ability to ask, the ability to say, I can be a great fit here. I think this makes a lot of sense to me. I'm interested in letting people know. Because once people know, I think the networks also adapt, right? Most people are looking for the best talent that they have and increase the probabilities of success. It's really that match which has to happen, because they don't know you exist in California, looking to provide that specific financing or regulatory expertise, which can add massive value to that company. So really putting yourself out and talking to people, I think, really helps towards that.
In terms of like in the venture capital world and in the investment world, it seems like, I think I saw a statistic that said that in the last 5 years, the amount of female-led funds has quadrupled. What are your thoughts on that, would you say?
So, I mean, I have mixed views on this, honestly. I mean, I always think it's really important to have places which allow greater diversity, which allow greater, opportunity. But on the same side, I'm very, very driven by the idea that it really should be pure caliber and expertise, because that really drives sustainability. I think the minute you mandate that you want 20% representation, 50% representation, I think you undersell yourself. I mean, honestly, I've never gone into a single place which said they're looking for women. I just find I don't want to be a checkbox. I want to be there because I can bring a lot of value. I want to be heard in a way which is not like, we brought her in to check the box. And to me, that's really important, right? So I don't think there is a place for both. I think you need to have the forums like the women-driven funds, et cetera, to create a larger pool and talent of women who get that opportunity to be there. So it's a very important role. But on the same side, I also truly think that to do this sustainably, it has to be really meritocratic and really caliber driven. You have to be the best person for that position, and you have to be able to show that you're the best person for that position consistently.
Yeah, so just work hard, be good at what you do, and make sure you put your hand up maybe when you're actually ready.
That's probably the biggest thing I find in difference between, I have third-year associates who think, men who think they're ready to be on boards, and I'll have these super qualified women who think, they spend 20 years and they still want to spend another 5 before they think they are willing or, ready to be on a board, not willing. And I think there's a big difference in that mindset. And it's really overcoming that mindset, I think, is one of the large factors.
Yeah, well, this has been great. And I think we've got a lot of really interesting insight here. So thank you so much for your time. And I'll speak to you soon.
Absolutely. And if there's anything I can do, please do let me know, Ali.
Excellent. Thank you once again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.